This topic is broken into two parts. Part 1 is the danger of wildfires. Fight or flight. Should you defend your home from the fire or evacuate? And exit strategies. Part 2 is improving indoor air quality when outside is all smoke, and what to take if you have to evacuate. At the time of this recording, we have just weathered the tail end of a week of smoke like you see in this picture. The whole western United States appeared to be ablaze, and the smoke went from Oregon and California out into the ocean about halfway out to Japan, and then the wind changed and it blew it back into the northwest where we are. And we woke up one morning to extremely thick smoke, and we couldn't see even as good as this picture, and it smelled really bad, and so we had to leave all the windows shut and do some of the strategies that Andrew is going to talk about. Then there were pictures and videos in the news of mass evacuations out of Oregon and California, like this picture here. So the wildfires in 2020 have been amazing. At the time of this recording, it is September 2020, and so this information is current now, but no doubt will be changing as we proceed further into the fire season and into future years. According to the National Interagency of Fire Center, more than 30,000 firefighters are currently contending with 94 large fires that have burned more than 4.6 million acres in 12 western states. 40 of these large fires have prompted evacuation orders, and many have been forced to flee with just the clothes on their backs because the fires were moving so rapidly. We have had a number of people that we are aware of that are friends or friends of friends who either evacuated or had their place burnt out, or even in one case somebody died. The August complex fire has already officially become the largest wildfire in the history of the state of California, and at this hour it continues to rage out of control. 5 of the 10 largest wildfires in California history have happened in 2020. In Oregon, 40,000 people have already been evacuated, and hundreds of thousands of more have been told to prepare to potentially evacuate. I can tell you, probably happened after these notices. There was basically an entire town in Oregon that was leveled because of the fire, and there was one in central eastern Washington that completely took the whole town out. The air quality index reading in Salem, Oregon was 512. That measurement was off the charts because the scale only goes to 500. Prior to 2020, we only had witnessed a few fire tornadoes in all of U.S. history, and now they're occurring every week or two. According to the Washington Post, most wildfire plumes have risen up to 10 miles high, and that is definitely extremely unusual. About a week after the fire tornado hit the Huntington Lake area, some fires were still burning root systems and underground at more than 1,500 degrees. That means the roots underground, the fire's already gone, probably the firefighters are already gone, but deep underground, it's already still 1,500 degrees. And I can tell you that metal melts at 1,200 degrees. So this is hotter than it takes to weld. We had an individual who was doing excavation work for developing our country property, and I was burning the slash from clearing the land. And he was telling me that his daughter had done a big burn like I was doing. And almost a year later, the fire started up from underground. So you can't underestimate the amount of heat that can be held in the ground. We had already trenched for our underground power when this was going on, and he, the excavator guy, had us measure the temperature in the trench where we were going to put the wire, and it was still too hot. Even though the fires were long gone, it was still too hot to put the wire in because it would have melted the shield on the cabling. Continuing September 2020, this is the worst wildfire season in California's history and the second worst wildfire season in Washington state history. Sadly, the fire season still has another 4 months remaining from September. There's at least 7 weeks left in the prime fire season. So what can we do? How do we be prepared for a wildfire? My personal experience with this was we were in Arizona for the winter, and our son-in-law and daughter lived in Arizona near us. And one of our mutual friends owned country property up in the mountains of north central Arizona. And my son-in-law called and said, there's a fire in the area of where our friend was. And he said, I'm going up there. Do you want to go? And I said, yes. And so we went, and we picked up some garden hoses at Lowe's, and we headed up there. And these folks had a house and a cabin and a shop, and they were off-grid, and they had solar equipment and rainwater catchment. They were set up quite nicely. But the fire was 2 miles away over the hill. So we spent the day running around and doing preparations for the oncoming fire, and that included pulling debris away from the buildings, firewood and limbs and stuff like that. And I said to them, I said, do you have insurance? Yes. I said, do you have pictures to show what you have? If you lose everything, can you prove it? And they said, no. So I spent an hour or two going around and taking pictures of everything, opening drawers and taking every angle of the buildings and so forth, so that they would have evidence for the insurance company. We had a neighbor at our previous country property who their house burnt down to the ground, and they had their insurance policy in the house. So they had no paperwork proving that they had insurance. And they went to battle with the insurance company, and the insurance company finally, after quite a bit of struggle, admitted they had insurance, but they said, but you don't have any proof of what you had. Fortunately for them, the realtor had already taken pictures to put their house on the market. And so they were able to take the realtor's pictures and use them as evidence for the insurance company. So the point is, one of the things to do is to take pictures. Everybody was praying for this particular Arizona fire, and the evacuation order came. The sheriff department came and told everybody they had to leave, and everybody did except the guy across the street, across the road, who lived there, and he said, I'm not leaving, and of course they can choose to stay. And we're thankful to the Lord. During the night, this fire that was coming their way, and 2 miles away, the wind changed and blew back into itself, and it never did burn their place. This is another, we have some dear friends who have she has a brother and a sister who live in central Washington. And this is the brother's place. You can see the fire went completely around his place. When he realized he was in trouble, he was surrounded with fire, and he left, and he prayed, Lord, take care of my place if at all possible. So this is a miracle. They did lose a cabin, and the pump house got burnt. But look at how close this fire got to their house. That's the house on the right. Here's the fence. The fire came up to the fence and then stopped. Here it came within about 4 inches of a pile of lumber. So you can see that in this case, they believe this was an answer to prayer. But there's something to say for being prepared, and part of preparation is knowing what you're going to do when you don't have time to think about what you're going to do. So it's a real thing. I heard of one family that was off-grid out in the mountains, and there was fire season, and they saw smoke and everything, so they decided to go drive out and up on the hill and see where the fire was. When they came back, their place was completely gone. So fire is no respecter of persons, and it's something to take seriously. So in planning ahead to try to mitigate damage of fire, one thing is buffer zones. And if you have a zone, you can see here it's about 30 feet from the house. You should be more protected there than, say, 100 feet out. And if you're 30 feet out, the suggestion is to remove all dead plants, grass, and weeds, that is, dead ones. Remove dead or dry leaves, pine needles from your yard, your roof, and your rain gutters. Remove branches that hang over your roof and keep the dead branches 10 feet away from your chimney. Trim trees regularly to keep the branches a minimum of 10 feet from other trees. Relocate wood piles to zone 2, which is over 30 feet away. Remove or prune flammable plants and shrubs near the windows, and remove vegetation and items that could catch fire from under decks. I can tell you in our present country property, we cleared enough land around the house. We were in timberland, and we cleared enough around the house so that a full-grown tree couldn't fall over and hit the house in a storm. And we maintain with a mower that perimeter, so if there's a wildfire, it's our hope that it would never get to the house. Because fires can be so violent that they can jump from treetop to treetop and actually fall out of the sky. And this is why the people in Arizona I was showing you earlier, they had a metal roof. And that helps because if you had a shake roof or some composite shingles and fire is falling out of the sky from the treetops, then it could catch your house on fire from the roof. So if you have a metal roof and you have either metal siding or some cement composite siding, you have a better chance of not having your house catch on fire, is my thinking. Zone 2 extends 100 feet from the buildings, and you cut and mow annual grass down to a maximum height of 4 inches, create horizontal space between trees and shrubs, create vertical space between grass, shrubs, and trees, and remove fallen leaves, needles, twigs, bark, cones, and small branches. However, they may be permitted to a depth of 3 inches. So now, what do you do to fight the fire? Fire extinguishers are a good idea. These are a variety of commercially available ones for different purposes. If you are in a no power kind of a situation where you're possibly using candles, like Patty talked about in a previous session, then it would be a good idea to have a fire extinguisher in each room. There are also a stick that you can throw in a fire in a wood-burning stove that has a chimney fire, and it will suffocate it so the chimney fire stops. So now if you're going to try to fight the fire, maybe you've got a burning barrel outside and it's got away from you, and now you've got this small fire and you're trying to fix it, then having some axes, shovels, type things are handy. This is a picture of the tools in a fire truck, the hand tools, and the reason I'm showing you this picture is I was watching a guy on the internet. He goes by the handle Wrangler Star, and he documents their life of moving out in the country. Has a huge following. He appears to be a Seventh-day Adventist, Sabbath-keeping individual. He's also a trained wildfire fighter, and so during this time when we've got all this fire going on, he's been posting videos on him helping neighbors and fighting fires and so forth. One of the videos was, what did we learn that we should do differently? And the thing that stuck out to me is he said, I'm going to have a pair of bolt cutters in my firefighting equipment. And that you can see there's bolt cutters, a couple of them in this fire truck picture. The reason he says is if you are trying to get to, say he's got a quad with some fire equipment on it, he's trying to get to this fire, and there's a gate in the way with a padlock on it. If you have bolt cutters, you can cut the bolt. The bolt cutter will cut the lock off. Or if you need to cut a fence in a farmer's field to get out into the field. So I thought that was something I hadn't thought of anyway. It was bolt cutter. Now for actual trying to put the fire out, there are a variety of ways of spraying retardant, whether it's water or something else. These are backpack style, probably 3 to 5 gallon units with a pump. You usually would hand pump it with one hand and then spray with the other. This is a friend of mine who put a 15-gallon water tank on the back of his quad, and then he has a little RV pump. You can see it on the top there, hooked up to his battery, so he can take his quad in the brush through the fire to be able to put it out, hopefully. Here's a little bigger option. This is a 200-gallon, I believe it is, water tank put on a Harbor Freight trailer. And it has, you can see on the fender is the RV pump, which hooks up electrically to the quad. And then garden hose on the top and a nozzle. So it's sitting there ready to go as a fire truck. Here's a bigger commercial version. These are called Skids because they slide in. And this has got a tank, probably a 30-gallon tank, and a hose and a generator with a gas-driven pump. And this is an even bigger one, made to fit in a quad, and it's even got a place to lay an injured person on the kind of a gurney on the top. And here's a real big one. We have a friend who has an agricultural operation with some big greenhouses, and they had a fire come right up to their greenhouse, so he decided to get proactive. So he got some of these liquid food storage bins. I forget what they're called, but they deliver bulk mayonnaise and stuff like that in industry, and you can get these containers used and rinse them out, use them. So he got 3 of them, put them on a trailer, double axle trailer, and he's got a pump and everything. And here it is hooked up to his big machine to tow it, and you can see how far that thing will shoot. It's pretty cool. Well, the question is, do you fight at all or do you flight? When should you fight a fire and when should you not? And I guess my advice is, if you're not a trained firefighter, if that fire's any bigger than a campfire, you should probably forget it and get out of there. But if it's just a spot fire and you can get it to stop, that's great, because by the time you get fire trucks there, it's probably going to be a lot bigger. So if you can put a little fire out that's out of control, with a fire extinguisher or something, great. But if it's going to endanger you, then you probably shouldn't do it unless you have some training. So you need to ask these questions. Is the fire small enough that I can put it out with a fire extinguisher? The one in the picture is not, probably. Is it safe from toxic gases? So for instance, if a house is burning, you've got electrical Romex wire that's melting and plastics and stuff. It's not good to breathe that stuff. Do you have an escape route? Before you decide to go and fight a fire, you need to look around and make sure you know how to get out of there so you don't get trapped. You might recall in the news a number of years ago in Arizona, there was, not too far from where that other fire was, I think it was the next year, there were some shotgun firefighters 9 of them, I believe, that died because they got surrounded by fire and they couldn't get out. They didn't have an escape. What do my instincts tell me to do? If your gut is saying, hey, it's time to leave, then you better leave. Emergency evacuation plan. You should make a plan. You should have a plan. You should build an emergency kit. And you should inform everybody that is in your circle of what to do, where to meet, what ifs. Disaster preparedness could include keeping copies of important documents, unlike the individual I told you about who had his insurance policy in the house. Have a grab-and-go kit. We did a episode that you can see in preparingforthetimeoftrouble.com about bug-out bags. This is a bug-out bag. This is an emergency grab-and-go bag version of that. You can clear your yard out routinely. You can mow around it, and you can stockpile the materials that you would need to survive or to fight fires or whatever it is. This is a really good document. If you're interested, it is it's a document that tells you how to prepare. Ready.gov is the location to go online, and you can acquire that document, and it'll give you lots of good information. This Wrangler star I was telling you about on the internet, he was talking about, as professional firefighters, they have these rules, and LACES, lookout. You need to have a spotter who can see and coordinate the fight. So if you've got 5 people on a crew fighting a fire, one of them is going to be on a high vantage point with radio communication to be able to tell people what to do. And the reason those 9 firefighters in Arizona lost their lives is because the spotter wasn't able to communicate with them. I don't remember if he, was not doing his job or whether he couldn't see or what the problem, whether the radios failed, but that's the reason they lost their life, because the spotter wasn't able to tell them what to do. Number 2 item is awareness. You need to be aware of your surroundings. You need to know what's behind you and on either side in case the fire's coming around you. You need to communicate, have radios between everybody involved. You need an escape route. We talked about that. You should have at least one, if not more. And you also need to have trigger points. You need to have clear in your mind, if this happens, I'm leaving, or if this happens, I'm leaving, so that when it happens, you don't contemplate whether you should leave. You've already determined when you had a clear head it's time to leave. And then you need to have safe zones where people can meet and take inventory of who's made it out and who we need to be looking for. So items to take or think about is, how many vehicles do you think you can get out of there? We had a friend whose brother was in, I believe, Idaho when there was a wildfire, and he went over to help him, and he had a bunch of horses. And so he was driving a pickup with a horse trailer behind and a horse out his door on a rein, walking beside him. And the fire was so close that he had to reach out and flick the fireballs off of his back, because the fire was coming out of the sky and landing on the horse. So how many vehicles, how many drivers do you have? This isn't a time to worry about a driver's license. How many trailers, motorcycles, quads? Figure out what's important, what needs to go, who's going to take them, and so forth. Here are items to take according to one website. 15-minute warning. If you only have 15 minutes, grab your wallet, purse, keys, glasses, cell phones, charger, emergency cash, credit card, pets, carriers, leashes, meds, clothes, shoes, hats for season, hearing aids, medications, flashlight, extra batteries, safety deposit box, keys, and checkbooks and bills to pay. If you have a 30-minute warning, you do all the things we just read, plus pillows, sleeping bags, blankets, address book, phone book, jewelry, most valuable personal items, etc., etc., etc. It's a good idea for you to make a list of your own priorities, because some of these things I think are really not that necessary. Toilet paper? Come on. We had a instance in our first country property, we've had 3, where one of our beloved neighbors 2 miles up the road called us in the night, and they were having a house fire. We ran up there to help them, and they're running around, and at that stage you're not thinking very well. You're just panicky, and you kind of just running around. And so they hadn't thought about unreplaceable things like family pictures. So I was walking around the house picking up pictures off the walls and making sure they got out. So make a list. And then if you have 1 hour warning, you got more time. They've got other suggestions. You can make your own. And then 2 hour warning. So planning for an evacuation. Know where to meet in a family emergency. I have family friends who have a house full of young kids, and they have educated everybody that if there is a fire in the night in the house, you are to meet on the other side of the big rock in the yard. And that way, you know whether somebody is missing or not. They don't have to run around. They just go to the rock. Talking to a neighbor yesterday about this kind of thing, and she said, well, what if I'm in my pajamas and then all these firefighters and stuff? And she says, well, I have slippers at each back door, so at least I'll have shoes on my feet. Anyway, you need to have a plan. The most important thing is people. All the rest of it is just stuff. So even though we can prepare and do preemptive things, the facts are the most important is people. And I had a friend who was a fellow teacher, and we had a mutual former student that he was good friends with. He and his wife had a child, a little baby, and he was babysitting. And my friend was drunk, and he was smoking, and his cigarette caught the place on fire. And he woke up, and he ran out, and then he realized that he was babysitting. So he went back into the fire to find the baby, not realizing that they had come and taken the baby because he was sleeping and drunk. And so he got really burned as a result of not having his act together. So people is what matters. Stuff doesn't matter, whether you have insurance or not. You can't replace people. It's all going to burn in the end anyway. 2 Peter 3:7 says, but by his word, the present heavens and earth are being reserved for fire, kept for the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly ones. So be careful, be planning ahead, preventing unnecessary pain in the case of a tragedy, and whether you are needing to evacuate because of a wildfire or some other kind of natural or man-made event, it's a good idea to have a game plan and let it be known with all of the family so you know what to do, what to take, where to go. And now part 2. Improving indoor air quality when outside is all smoke, and what to do if you have to evacuate.
Living with wildfires, improving indoor air quality, and what to take if evacuation is necessary. First, a verse from Hebrews 12, 25-29. See that you refuse not him that speaketh, for if they escaped not who refuse him that spake on earth, how much more shall not we escape if we turn away from him that speaketh from heaven? Whose voice then shook the earth, but now he hath promised, saying, Yet once more I shake not the earth only, but also heaven. And this word, yet once more, signifieth the removing of those things that are shaken, as of things that are made, that those things which cannot be shaken may remain. Wherefore receiving a kingdom which cannot be moved, let us have grace, whereby we may serve God acceptably, with reverence and godly fear. For our God is a consuming fire. And you can see here just a terrible fire scene at night and the total consumption of everything in the path of that fire. just gone. And the doctrine of a ever burning hell is not one that the Bible supports, because a fire consumes everything that's there, and when it's consumed, it is complete. So just the ashes are left behind from this fire here. From Revelation 3, verse 18, I counsel thee to buy of me gold tried in the fire, that thou mayest be rich, and white raiment, that thou mayest be clothed, and that the shame of thy nakedness do not appear, and anoint thine eyes with eye salve, that thou mayest see. So these are a couple crucibles, and a crucible is something in which a metal is tried and purified. And this life of ours on earth is our crucible that we are tried and purified in as we develop our character for heaven. I was looking for a picture of pure gold, transparent gold, as in the streets of gold, but here on earth, evidently, that purification process is not available. And this, the picture on the right, the crucible has gold that is being poured into a mold, and then the crucible on the left is another metal crucible that is purifying an ore of some nature. So we are undergoing the refining of God in the crucible of this world. Lately here in 2020, we've had quite the fires here across the American West, and you can see a downtown, looks like a fog scene. It's just smoke that has dimmed a particular town in a very significant way. You can see the smoke plumes going up. They can go up into the lower atmosphere and create their own weather systems and thunderstorms in their own rights. They can create lightning and cause hazards for air travel. Just amazing amounts of smoke that can be created. And then we saw it actually drift halfway across the Pacific to Hawaii and then come back with the wind that we had here on the West Coast. So outdoor air quality can be atrocious, and that can definitely affect indoor air quality. And we'll talk about how we can make indoor air quality better for those who are trying to stay away from the bad air. So indoor air can be improved primarily by using air filtration systems. Using a HEPA filter. HEPA will filter out the particulate matter, and you can run those small units 24 hours a day on high during really smoky conditions. Other times it may be beneficial just to remove pollen and other agents from the air if you're sensitive during just different times of the year. Be sure you have spare filters on hand so that you can replace them if necessary. There are a lot of different styles and units and varying price points. The particular one here is around $700, but you can get them for less. You can get them for more, but they can help exchange the air throughout your home and make it more breathable and more healthful. A cheap do-it-yourself version is using a filter that is large enough to cover a box fan. And it's also a HEPA filter. Take that and tape it over the box fan, and it'll suck the air from one side, push it through, and in that process, filter the air as it goes through. So you can make your own HEPA air filter if you don't have one on hand. You can also use the filtration system of your conventional heating unit. All heating units have filters. Some have additional filters in between the cold air return on top there and the heating unit itself. Varying units have different types of arrangements. But in order to use that filtration system, you can see that switch on the left of the unit there, maybe just a fan unit, but you can also use from your thermostat. In many cases, the on setting is for recirculating air. The auto setting, it just flips on and on when the heater or the cooling comes on, and you can alternate the system between AC or heating if you have like a heat pump or something of that nature. If the system is off and you have the fan on, then it's air recirculating and passing it through the cool air return, sucking it through and passing it through your HEPA filters in your heating system and then pushing that through your vents. So when you're using your heating air conditioning, you use a HEPA filter. This is a box type filter. You can look for the rating on the side. You want to have a MERV 13. It's on the right hand side there in the black box, rating or greater. Most HEPA filters are going to be at least 13, and so that's the rating that you want to have on your filter in order to have good air filtration, especially for smoky air. Basically, it's a woven kind of mesh of paper filters, HEPA, that the particulate matter comes in and gets trapped in or diffuses through depending on its size. So some basic indoor air quality improving strategies. Number one, don't use your vacuum cleaner. Most vacuums, unless they're very, very high quality, just send more dust spewing into the air when you use them. So when the air quality is bad, just be sure you don't vacuum as well, because the beaters on the carpet tend to send up more of a dust plume in your house. Don't fry or broil anything. It creates excessive smoke that you would typically turn your fan on anyway to suck it out, but it still adds bad particulate matter into your air. If necessary, if your windows are leaky, you may need to tape them to prevent air leaking by them. Just use painter's tape to do that. You can use plastic to cover your windows as well if you feel like you need to have a greater seal. You can also hang damp windows over your windows. That the dampness will trap the particulates as they come in. And limit your entrance and exiting of the house. As you open the doors, you allow smoke to come in. So if you keep those doors closed as much as possible, it'll help maintain air quality. Close your drapes. That can also help cut down on drafts. Put out like a cookie sheet of baking soda that will help absorb odors and particulate matter. Rather than just in a box, you can spread it out, increasing the surface area. And then also make sure that you're personally hydrated, plenty of drinking water to help any toxins that you ingest to be passed out more readily. You can also use essential oil diffuser or a pot on the stove to create steam from essential oils. There's a blend that was suggested by a family who was actually in this situation. Cedar, rosemary, thyme, fir, and sage. So putting that blend together, it may help to trap the particulate matter and take it out of the air in some way. So it could be a helpful tool in not only kind of cutting that smoke, but also providing good essential oil aromatherapy in the process. And then also you can use indoor plants. Indoor plants have an amazing way to cut down on the CO and the CO2 that may be produced by large-scale smoke fires. Smoke from fires. The spider plant is the one that is best and most well known for its air purifying qualities. Also very resilient and easy to take care of and easy to propagate. So spider plants are very helpful in helping to improve indoor air quality. So if you're needing to evacuate, what are some things to think about when you are preparing for evacuation? Number one, why are you evacuating? Are you evacuating because there is a fire coming on you or for some other reason? Is it just smoky? And that will help determine what kind of things and what you need to take with you. Is it a permanent departure or is it just a temporary thing? You may not know. It could be permanent. So you need to think about the permanency of an evacuation and what do you really need. That will also help you streamline your exit strategy. A key point that was, is urged and also noted by some friends of ours who recently underwent an evacuation scenario. They were ready well in advance, and it makes the preparation time much quicker and less stressful when you need to evacuate. Typically, the timetables for evacuation are very short compared to what you might expect. and preparation helps to cut down on the stresses of the departure. So where are you going? Are you going to an evacuation center, completely out of town, to a friend, relative, or just anywhere to be away? Are you going to a neighbor's house? That can also have an influence on the types of things that you might need to take. If you need to be completely self-contained, or if you're going to a place where you know that there is some certain items already available that you may not need to tote along, that can be beneficial. So evacuation is never a fun event. The upper picture is a potential evacuation that's taking place. If it was truly an evacuation, they might actually have the traffic in the opposing lane also headed in the direction out. This could just be a traffic jam, although there's a number of medical transport vehicles there too that may be moving some patients from a hospital out of harm's way. You can see a recent one here on the left in Texas, where evacuation is taking place, and it usually happens with a sense of urgency. So it needs to be orderly though too, or it ends up being chaos. So here's a list of things that was suggested by some friends of ours who had made preparations ahead of time, as well as some additional items that they added for an evacuation from a fire, a wildfire. And this evacuation could be from a tsunami, could be from a tornado, could be from a volcano. So any kind of a disaster that would require evacuation, these would be similar types of items that you would consider. Probably a blizzard evacuation would be a little different if you're in that part of the country, because typically your home is not going to be destroyed in a blizzard. So a few changes of clothes. That would be all layers from the skin out. That way you have several days of clean clothes and can wash clothes potentially if needed, depending on the duration of your evacuation. Bring your work attire. You may still be able to go to your place of employment because it may be separate from where you live. Some people travel quite a distance to their jobs. So go prepared to go to work. Life doesn't stop. Time and tide wait for no man, even though things are going on. Your vehicle emergency kit should have lots of things that you will need along the way. Some snacky foods, other supplies like tarps, plastic tape, that type of thing, tools, whatnot, that you have in your vehicle emergency kit, first aid kit, etc. Should take several days of food. You don't know how long you're going to be gone, if you're going to be completely self-contained, or if you're going to be at someone's house and you can just help out with the food supplies in that regard. Basic camping equipment, so those will cover things like sleeping, cooking, and shelter. Again, in case you need to be completely self-contained during your evacuation. Water, you should plan on 1 gallon per person per day. And maybe take along also a way to purify water, whether that be some kind of a water filtration system or purification tablets or chlorine. Take computers, backup drives, hard drives that has important papers and things like that. That's in lieu of the file cabinets of yesterday. Most people have their items stored electronically. Snag those, personal papers. Important to have your insurance documents, passports, birth certificates, passwords and logins. If they're printed, that might be helpful. It's not something you want to just have floating around, but if your electronics are destroyed, you may still need those if you're able to access the web-based applications. If you don't have them memorized, be sure to take the Word of God, take your Bible. That is a comfort as well as a guide and is a key component of your survival strategy. Think about your pets, your canaries, your cockatiels, your poodles, and your horses, your dogs, cats, whatever animals you have, lizards. You just need to make sure that you have their carriers, their food, their care supplies as you evacuate as well. I have a friend who is involved in some horse evacuations down in Oregon during this period of time, and thankfully they had some property that were able to accommodate several horses from neighboring places that had to evacuate. You can snag some irreplaceable pictures, like baby pictures or wedding pictures that are printed, family DVDs of pictures, favorite recipes. Recipe collections can be irreplaceable. So because you've altered them, you maybe have heirloom recipes, etc. Your glasses, prescription contacts, solution for those, various medications if you take them, to provide you with those resources throughout the duration of your evacuation. A good resource for additional items in your evacuation scenario is Ready.gov. Very excellent resource, a number of checklists and things, some things that they suggested above and beyond what our friends had. Or if you have young kids, that's another layer of things. The folks that were friends of ours were just a couple with no kids at home. So you want to bring, formula diapers, etc., for infants, and various things to support the family. Cash, check, change, cards, travel, or credit cards, traveler's checks, some form of payment, so that you can carry on life wherever you may be. If your climate is cold, make sure you take cold weather gear. Fire extinguisher should come along. Matches, fire starter, personal hygiene, feminine products, toothbrush, toothpaste, etc. TP. You may not have toilet paper at the place you're going. Who knows? Hand sanitizer, a mess kit, plates, cups, bowls, eating utensils, etc. Paper and pencil. Books, games, and puzzles for entertaining kids and yourself, along with the Bible. Chlorine bleach, you can use that in a couple different ways. 1 part to 9 part water for a disinfectant solution, that's a stronger solution, or 16 drops per gallon for water purification. So eyedropper would be a good tool to have associated with your chlorine bleach. Make sure it's unscented and no fabric softener, because you don't want to have that in anything that you would be drinking. Again, from Ready.gov, a basic readiness kit, a gallon per person per day in water for both drinking and cleanliness, 3 days of non-perishable food, weather radio, NOAA weather radio, tone alert, extra batteries, flashlight or headlamp. I prefer a headlamp because it gives you hands-free options, a first aid kit, a signal whistle in an earthquake or even in a fire. That could be helpful in helping someone locate you. Dust mask, tarp, plastic sheets, duct tape, aid you in sheltering in place, and also any kind of hazardous air. Ziplocs, baby wipes, garbage bags, zip ties, helpful for hygiene, for just a makeshift bathroom scenario. Basic tools, you can turn off utilities, fix your car, help someone else out. Can opener if you have canned foods, a local map, and cutting utensils like a pocket knife. So the bottom line is be prepared, and this graphic I thought was quite appropriate. It's not just for scouts, it's for everybody. I try to live my life in this with this motto, being prepared, and there's a lot of different things to think about in that scenario of being prepared, but if you don't think about it, then it will become as a greater surprise. So as you prepare for any kind of evacuation, think about the possibilities.